Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I go through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me as we wave goodbye to another companion. If you're new here, then welcome. Please like, subscribe and clang the cloister bell to help more people find and run the marathon alongside us. And if you're a regular viewer to this marathon, then I think you've probably got a pretty good idea of what's in store for today. I've been looking forward to this since I decided to do another marathon. As with a lot of the recons, I didn't experience this story for the first time until I did a full watch through from the beginning. And I have to say, The Mythmakers was probably my most treasured discovery of that very first marathon, and it's been a highlight of every one ever since. Now, opinions on some stories have changed slightly, just not by huge amounts. I mean, yeah, okay, so I liked The Chase less than I ever have done before, but I didn't like it much last time either. So while opinion on the whole hasn't changed drastically, there are no guarantees. So will The Mythmakers continue to be a delight this time around? Of course it will. Come on, it's a Hartnell historical. How can I not be utterly charmed by it? Except, while I have always loved this story and continue to love it this time, this might actually be the most seismic change in opinion on the marathon yet. And I'll get to why shortly. Not only is it a Hartnell historical, I firmly believe it is one of the strongest examples of both of those things. Not only is it one of the very best historicals, it's also one of the very best Hartnell stories. And I think it boasts one of the very strongest scripts in Doctor Who's far-reaching history, and also contains some of the strongest performances to boot. The undercurrent of humour, which admittedly isn't always such an undercurrent, is sublime, and it makes this easily the funniest story so far, more so than out-and-out comedies like The Romans and especially The Chase. It's this injection of humour which helps it zip along so joyously, and it plays a really important part in the construction of the story. It isn't just there solely to make the viewers laugh. For a long time, this story has been one of my most wanted to be recovered. In fact, for a time, it was probably my most wanted. And given how little material remains of it, the reconstruction can only take some credit for how enjoyable The Mythmakers is. A considerable amount of credit, I'll grant you, but the rest of it has to be down to how good the story itself is. Despite what little remains of it, it still somehow feels richer than most of the existing serials we've had up to this point. It's one of those times where I get so drawn in that I forget I'm watching a reconstruction, and most definitely one cobbled together out of what was available, which was hardly anything. If it were ever returned, this would be, in a flash, the one I would show to people who kind of doubted the delights of classic Doctor Who, regardless of what production limitations there may be and may be exposed by the recovery of the story. Partly because this one has almost a modern sensibility running through it, and it never flags, not once. And it isn't just the cheeky nature of the script which means it has an almost modern sensibility. There's also the almost Moffat-esque timey-wimey nature of the Doctor himself being responsible for the concept and execution of the Trojan horse, which plays far better than the Doctor himself being responsible for burning down Rome. You see, yet again, I can find nothing whatsoever with which to fault The Mythmakers. It has some truly great moments, such as Paris calling Achilles out to fight, Stephen outrageously flattering Paris, Odysseus nominating the Doctor to be the one to test the flying machine. The problem I've got here is that I could just go on listing them. And I haven't even got to such wonderful lines as "that Helen thing was just a misunderstanding," or the Doctor complaining from the discomfort of the Trojan horse that Odysseus didn't give him enough time to fit shock absorbers, or Cassandra's reply to her brother Paris's complaint that he gets more respect from their prisoners than he does from his own family.
They don't know you as well as we do.
Beyond the incredibly entertaining dialogue and fantastic set pieces, there's also one of the most engaging stories. The travellers are separated in a way that doesn't feel contrived, and then unknowingly pitted against each other when the Doctor must help the Greeks take Troy and Vicky must help the Trojans save it. Vicky against the Doctor. Each element comes together in a natural and satisfying way, coagulating into Doctor Who at its very best. And as is often the case, When the guest performances are this good, the main cast raise their game in the presence of them, and not a foot is put wrong, aside from Achilles, obviously. Paris is a hoot.
Then woe to the house of Priam. Woe to the Trojans.
I'm afraid you're a bit late to say woe to the horse. I've just given instructions to have it brought into the city.
Menelaus is fantastic.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's a horse, isn't it?
Well done, Menelaus. But what sort of horse? That's the point.
A big horse.
Exactly, a very big horse.
Is this some sort of a horse that's at least 40 feet high? Oh, but horses don't grow as big as that. Do they?
Priam is wonderful, and so on and so on. Or is it Priam? As a result, Hartnell, O'Brien and Purvis really bring it too. O'Brien particularly. This is easily Vicky's best outing yet, and Maureen O'Brien makes the most of it and then some. Fist-pumpingly kick-ass.
Look, be fair. How was I to know that you'd managed to get round King
You
Priam?
might have guessed I know how to take care of myself.
And achingly sweet when getting to know Troilus. A beautifully good soul when teaching him about kindness, and still with that streak of cheekiness that has always set her apart from Susan. When told,
Now, don't be frightened, child. You shall die when I say so, and not a moment before.
her response is wonderfully withering.
That's very comforting.
Is it a shame that her best story is her final one? Not really. It's a shame that she's leaving the show, of course, but it's not like she's been waiting for a good story all this time. She has been fantastic throughout the entirety of her tenure on the TARDIS, so her best story being her final one just means that she leaves with a bang rather than a whimper, and your mileage may vary, but I happen to think that she leaves with a bang. In fact, I'd say she has the most graceful exit of all the companions so far. Not behind the scenes, obviously, that was really unceremonious. But her departure is set up far more skillfully than Susan's, Ian's and Barbara's were. Admittedly, for the latter two, theirs was a spur-of-the-moment discovery that they could in fact go home, but that this story allows for the foreshadowing and better constructed foreshadowing than Susan's exit only makes Vicky's leaving all the more impactful. Leaving the TARDIS for love is far more convincing here than in the Dalek invasion of Earth. And Hartnell's speech to Susan notwithstanding, this feels like the first time it's treating the loss of one of its lead characters as an event, as it should be, particularly when it's lovely Vicky. It's really, really, really sweet. She's absolutely splendid and I will miss her. Then, without ever really doing a U-turn or about face, the tone jumps to a creeping sense of dread as the horse is taking into Troy and the Greeks lie in wait. While bouncy in comics so far, this is the moment where you realise that the humour hasn't just been there to entertain, although it has done that in spades. It was also there as a means to endear these characters to us, whether or not they're Greek or Trojan. And because we now care for them, they are able to be put in danger alongside our regulars and for it to mean something. I mean it wholeheartedly when I say that I think this is the most accomplished script work on the show up to this point. Hysterically funny, fist-clenchingly tense and extremely moving. And there's even an orgy joke. Then off we shoot with a new companion and our remaining existing one terribly, potentially fatally wounded. Katerina joining is pretty out of left field, I'll grant you, and perhaps the least satisfying plot point in the story, but it is nicely different, I think. I'll obviously talk about Katerina a bit more next time, but I do very much like her perspective of seeing travelling on the TARDIS as, like she says here, a journey through the beyond, believing herself to have died already. It's quite plausible for a woman of her time, having seen her city attacked, decimated, her people destroyed, and then to suddenly find herself on the TARDIS of all things, to assume that she's died already. And maybe this will account for her actions in a couple of episodes' time. With 90 episodes ticked off now, I find myself emboldened by my love for the story that I've just watched. And I know that there's a Leviathan that lies ahead, but I am now more than ready to tackle it. Bring it on. Far too many solid gold moments and great jokes, but I think I'll have to go for the Doctor moaning that he didn't have time to fit shock absorbers when building the actual Trojan horse.
only you would have allowed me another day to fit shock absorbers. Do it.
This isn't even a problem for me, it just gets it by default. Katerina's introduction may not have been seeded as well as Vicky's departure, i.e. not at all, but we know why it had to happen. But wait, why is this story, which I still very clearly utterly adore, the story where my opinion has changed most dramatically on this marathon? Well, it's true, I've always loved it, and that hasn't changed this time around. It's just that this used to be my very favourite First Doctor story, the Hartnell story, which I thought was his absolute best above all others. And that has changed this time around. I don't feel like I enjoy the Mythmakers any less, it's just that it's obvious to me this time around there are some that I prefer above it, and I find that a testament to how much I'm enjoying this marathon. I'm having more fun on this marathon than I have done on previous ones, so far. So, while I feel a little bit sorry for the Mythmakers for being dethroned, I'm actually quite excited about what this implies. You see, if my all-time favourite First Doctor story can change, then what does that mean for the rest of the marathon? I always said that going into this marathon that nothing was guaranteed and that I was going into every story with an open mind, but now this really does feel like anything could happen. I can't wait to plough on and have more long-standing opinions and cherished beliefs challenged. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this relatively major shake-up of both the TARDIS crew and my own personal perception of Doctor Who, then you know how YouTube works, please give it a thumbs up, it really helps no end. And what are your thoughts on the Mythmakers? Is it an absolute Hartnell highlight for you too, or a big old Billy bomb? And was Vicky's departure handled well, or just as rushed as Katerina's introduction? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for a marathon within a marathon with Doctor Who's most epic undertaking yet. So if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll see you back on Kemble.